corner office on the 42nd floor of a New York City office building, you're living large. And I had a corner office. Phone rings, you push the button, this is Pat. Are you the marketing guy? Yeah, this is Garth Brooks. I've heard of you.
Patterson, New Jersey, 1950. Let's go back to when you were just a little kid. What was life like for you?
Well, I mean, after the war, America created the Levitt towns of America, which is towns where they built every house that looked the same, except the driveway was on the left or the right, so they were different. And I was really raised in a little town named Pompton Lakes, New Jersey, which was a town built for veterans who just got married and wanted to have kids. So we were an Irish Catholic family, 5 kids, and went to Catholic grammar school. Played a lot of sports, played all sports, and it was a really nice community to kind of grow up. You were in earshot of New York City, but you didn't have any of the problems of the city.
Do you remember your grandparents at all?
Yeah, I remember both sets. My father's parents, the Quigley grandparents, they died in the 50s. So they died before I was even 10. But I remember that, they lived in Ridgewood, New Jersey. They had, the big stone house with the ivy, and my mother's family lived in Patterson, New Jersey, and he was worked for the Erie Railroad and retired after 50 years and got a gold watch,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
he left to me. So it was a really close knit family, especially on my mother's side.
So when you were a kid, did you ever hang out at the railroad?
No, I guess I took the railroad a couple times with him, and I got to see what he did for a living, and he would show me what everybody else did. That's from the engineer to the guy shining shoes. But I didn't see anything I wanted to be when I grew up.
Now, did your grandparents, were they born here or did they come from somewhere?
No, they were all born here.
Yeah.
All my great grandparents came in, but that my grandparents were born here.
Did you ever hear any of the stories about how your great grandparents got here?
Probably not. I mean, let me say this: if I did, I wasn't paying attention.
Now, is your dad in the service?
My dad was in the Air Force. He was in the Army Air Corps.
Right, during World War II?
In the Pacific. And my dad was a really smart guy. And his jobs was really to figure out mathematically what they could do with airplanes. I mean, he would explain to me the math of just the simple thing is fuel. How far can they go and get back under different conditions? They would calculate those. We didn't have calculators in those days, so they would have to calculate all those by hand. And that was basically his job, was to almost logistics, if you would.
Yeah. Do you know where he was stationed? Was he in the island, Saipan, or
he was in the Pacific. I don't know specifically where.
Okay. So was he in combat at all ever? Do you know?
No.
Okay. Okay. So in high school, what was high school life like for you?
I went to DePaul High School, which was in Wayne, New Jersey. And I guess it was probably the #1 academic high school in the state of New Jersey. I think it was like 99.9% of the kids who graduated went to college. So it was a college prep high school. And I don't think they appreciated me. We had nuns. I got along with some of the nuns because everybody can have one deviant, and I was lucky. I fit into everybody's quota. And it was run by a Monsignor, which meant it was a big deal, to have a Monsignor running your school. And he really wanted to follow the straight and narrow, and that just has never been my MO. Yeah, so I ran into him constantly. I think I was thrown out of the school at least 5 times.
Yeah.
And my father would always, make penitence or something and get me back in. Yeah. And my last time, I was a junior. My brother Mike was a senior. My brother Mike was the president of his freshman class, his sophomore class, his junior class, and his senior class. So here's Mike totally involved. And me, I was a skier, so I didn't spend that much time in school and very little time on homework. Yeah. And so when we were juniors, and this is a big football school. I remember when Fred Keel was the coach, he became a friend of mine. When he retired or moved on to another school, I think he was like 99-4 or something. So it was a real powerhouse football school. And so the pep rally was a big deal. So these are the early days of Saturday Night Live, and the seniors said, "Why don't we let the juniors control the next pep rally?" So they gave it to me. I wrote Saturday Night Live all the way, and I insulted everybody: God, the Pope, the Bishop, the Monsignor, the nuns. I mean, all of them. I got them all, and
Yeah,
it was very funny.
yeah, yeah.
And to say there were 10 of us on the committee, they laughed hysterically. That was my job, to make people laugh.
Right.
And when they before we got it on, the nuns found out about it. They lined us up, and I remember them, like ruling the roost and then saying, walking through the different people. Do you think it's funny? No, I don't think it's funny. Do you think it's funny? No, I don't think. They got to me, and I said, "Do you think it's funny?" I said, "Listen, it may be rude, but it is funny as hell." I mean, and so I was on the way out on that one. And so the rule was you had to walk the line of courage. And so my job in the middle of the new pep rally, which was boring as hell, was to walk up to the stage and get on the microphone and say, "Hey, I just want to apologize for everybody I would have potentially offended," on and on and on. And then I could get back in school. And my father said, "Please do that for me." I said, "Dad, if it's for you, I'll do it." And we're sitting there, and everybody knows what has to go on. High school, everybody knows what's going on. And it's going on. Is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? And I never did it. And I always respected Monsignor for this. He let me back in the school. He never said this, but I believe he said that was how Pat walked his line of courage. I didn't just give in because I was told to give in, and that was probably a bad example for somebody like me because I rode that for the rest of my life.
Right, right, right. Now I see the New York Yankee jersey behind you. Did
That's
you? Did
Yogi
you like
Berra's
that?
jersey.
Huh?
That's Yogi Berra's jersey.
Oh, that's a real jersey from
The
Yogi.
real jersey, as bad as there. I've actually got a World Series ring. It was a gift from Garth Brooks to me.
Wow. Wow. That's really neat. Now, as a kid, you were a big Yankee fan, I take it.
We went to Yankee Stadium the first time in 1957. And I thought my father was Rand McNally. He drove from Pompton Lakes, New Jersey, into the Bronx, right to Yankee Stadium. I was like, how can he? My dad must be Christopher Columbus. He knew everything. I'm a 6-year-old kid,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and became a lifetime fan of the Yankees. And of course, I'll die a Yankee fan.
What was it like walking into that stadium the first time? Do you remember the emotion, the feeling you had when you got in there?
Certainly, the first thing is the size and how irrelevant you were as a fan. You were so small. But my dad, who understood the Yankees, put us in the bleachers, which you can't go to anymore.
Right.
So I saw my first Yankee game without a back, sitting on a bench in the
Yeah.
bleachers in Yankee Stadium. Of course, Mick hit one into the bleachers, and and so it became a lifetime love affair. And I don't know how many times I've been to Yankee Stadium, but
And what did your dad do for a living?
my dad was a printer. Um, he came home from the war, and he was a very smart guy, and he really should have continued his education, but he had 5 kids, and so he just became a laborer. Really, I remember how hard he worked, and how much he used that to tell me this isn't what you want to do when you grow up. Go to
Yeah.
college, get a good education, and do something special.
Now, your mom, was she a homemaker then for the five kids?
Yes, she was.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
She was the glue of the family, also, and it's probably true of most families of the post-war baby boomers. The father, was the moneymaker, and the mother ran the household.
right, right. Now, when you were ready for college, Vietnam was going on and everything. What was it like that time?
Well, you had to decide if you were pro-war or anti-war. And if you were, remember, this is the Tet Offensive. And I remember my brother Mike was a year older than I was. He got drafted in 1967. And when he came home from his physical, he just looked so dejected. And I said, "What's the matter?" He goes, "I just found out I've got a heart problem." "Well, you have a heart problem?" He goes, "Yes, I've had it my whole life." Now, remember, my brother Mike was a great athlete. Nobody ever knew he had a heart problem. I go, "What does that mean?" He goes, "That means they can't draft me." so so that was my introduction to the draft. So I was going to go to school in Wisconsin and ski, and I was in Wisconsin, Scott, for 3 days, and I said I'd rather die in Vietnam. I'm just being honest, than be in Wisconsin. Nothing wrong if you're from there, but it's like anything in life. You're more comfortable with the
Right.
environment you were raised in. So I left school, and I remember I had never flown an airplane. and there was no plane. The plane to Chicago, you would fly to Chicago and then you'd fly to New York.
Right.
That she says, I'm sorry, that flight's gone. I go, well, when's the next flight? She said, tomorrow at noon. It's like, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, really? She goes, yeah, there's only one flight a day. I was like, oh, how else can I do this? You can take a bus. So I was so anxious to make the commitment to get going. I took a Greyhound bus from Ashland, Wisconsin to Chicago. As a kid, remember, I'd never been to an airport. And I have skis, 12 sets of skis and big bags. Got it all checked in, got on a plane. We're sitting on the plane. Now, these are businessmen because this is a red eye.
Right.
And the stewardess comes on and says, if there's a problem in the beginning in the flight and there's no air, this bag will drop down. You put it on your face and you'll be able to breathe. I said, great. And I see these businessmen putting the arms up, laying down. I'm like, hey, I'm not waking them up. If that airbag comes down, they can die. I'm going to stay awake and make sure I don't die. So I stay all the way. And it's probably, 100 miles, I guess, before we land. And I'm thinking in my head, and I look out the window and I see a road. And I'm thinking, we're going to land on Route 80. The bags are going to come down. And it was Kennedy Airport. And it's just, the runway is so huge that it looks like Route 80. And that was my first flight. And that was the end of, so that was on a Friday. My parents were away on vacation. And so Monday morning at 9 o'clock, door opens, a guy with a telegram says, you've been drafted, go for your physical tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I remember this in my head. Ellison Street in Paterson, New Jersey is where the draft board was. I don't know if I could find Ellison Street, but I'll bet I could. And so you drive down and a little blue-haired lady's there. And she says, where'd you go to high school? I said, DeVille High School. She goes, you went to DeVille High School? Why aren't you in college? And I could never do it again. I started to cry. I said, because I was in school and I found out my parents were eating, so my parents were eating dog food so that they could pay for my education. Remember, I paid my whole education. So my parents were eating dog food to pay for my education. I said, that's it, I'm quitting. I'll just go in the Army. The lady says, can you get into college? I said, I'm certain I can. It was September 17th, 1968. And I said, I'm sure I can. She goes, you have 24 hours. I disappear. I go home. I call every state school, Patterson State, Trenton State, Montclair State, you name it. You can't get in. It's too late. Somebody says, have you tried a community college? So what's that? He goes, that's a 2-year school. I said, do you get a draft deferment for that? He goes, yeah. I said, hold on. So I find Morris County Community College. I call them up and the woman says, you went to DeVille High School? You're in. That's fine. You're in. And I said, so she's talking about, what do you want to study? I said, history. She goes, no, math. And I'm going through everything you think. She goes, oh, what do you got? She goes, we have 2 seats in data processing. I said, what is that? She goes, the computer said, it's the future of the free world. I'll take one. And I said, where is it now? She goes, and she starts describing where the school is. She says, no, not where's the school. Where's Morris County? So I jump in the car. It's about an hour and a half away from me. I drive to the school, Route 10, and Morristown, New Jersey is a big town. And I go in, I sign up. I get my documents. I drive all the way down back to Patterson Street in Nelson, New Jersey. I give it to the woman. I never get drafted. Fast forward 15 years. I'm in Vermont skiing. My dad calls me and says, you're on the front page of the Patterson Evening News. The old woman dies with the blue hair.
Right.
Who was running an underground railroad. Remember, those days weren't highly computerized. She took our files and just didn't draft us. Like I never got what was it called, like a 4S or something when you were a student. I never got after the lottery, I was fine. And so that little blue-haired woman saved my life because I would have gone to Vietnam and my troops would have shot me if I didn't shoot myself. So that was life in the 60s, and it was a time when you realize the government's lying to us. And this is a time when the Catholic Church is saying no to birth control. So, well, the church is lying to us. And you start going around, it turns out that all officials are lying to you. So in the 60s, you kind of become a rebel. And I did a paper for the Beatles, was one of the projects. And it was like, the Beatles gave us a soundtrack for the anti-war movement, a soundtrack for the drug revolution, so they kind of walked us through the whole problem of the 60s. And if you were a child of the 60s paying attention, I don't think you'll ever be old. I mean, I think you'll always be young because you'll always be a rebel because you learn not to trust anybody, basically, except what you can see and touch.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because you wound up in the music industry, but it was years later. So when you're doing a paper on the Beatles, did you have a love for music back then? Was it in your thought process? Because I know you went into the skiing industry, beer industry.
Well,
Take us through that.
I really skiing, I think, defined me. I was lucky as a teenager. I got a job in a ski shop. Remember, in the '60s, there weren't that many people skiing, but it was people like me who made skiing the number one family sport in America. From working in ski shops and because of our location, I knew John Perriman, who was the technical editor of Skiing Magazine. So he's like the guy.
Right.
And a company named Solomon was coming in from France, which is now the biggest company. And they wanted to start an American company and they wanted people. And so John, to my luck, recommended me. And what I did sent me all around the world many, many times for Solomon. So we really had a really revolution in the way we approached the business of skiing. And I was really in the epicenter of that whole revolution. And so that gave me a chance to go wherever I wanted in the ski business. And I ended up uh, working with my hero, which was Jean-Claude Quigley. So if you have older listeners, they'll remember Jean-Claude Quigley, the only athlete to ever win the slalom, giant slalom, and downhill in the same Olympics.
Right. Right.
And Keely and I worked to save a company named Lang, Lange. Bob Lang was an American, invented the plastic ski boot, the modern ski boot, and went bankrupt. And Laurent Boisvive, the chairman of Rosneo, bought it. And he called me up and said, can you help me? I bought a company for $100,000 in my first year. I lost $23 million. So I went over to meet him in Hotel de la Cigone in Geneva, Switzerland. And we put a deal together. And within 2 years, Lang was the most profitable company in the ski business.
Right. Right.
So uh, the good thing about that is it was a performance business. So you got to measure yourself. If you don't win the Olympics or the World Cup, you're not the best.
Right.
So learning performance was really important for everything I've done in my life. That is, I don't care if you're selling beer, watches, or ski equipment, make sure you're the best at it.
So getting into this industry, it was that break because of that person that you knew in the area where you lived.
Yeah. And then the second break was we put together a program. Everybody was breaking their leg, basically. That was the problem with skiing.
Right.
So
Right.
what we did at Salomon was figure out why, and we put together a program where we trained the ski shops and we certify them, and then we'd actually insure their product liability insurance on a binding, which made it profitable. And and after the first month or so, I had a 94% passing rate. That is, they had to take an exam. And the next guy was Kevin Cronin, I think, out in San Francisco, may have had an 18% passing rate.
Right.
And all the other guys doing it had an attitude like, oh, yeah, I'm Solomon. I'm like, Jesus. But I had remembered from graduate school what a test was to be valid and reliable. It had to actually be testing what the guy's going to do. So Solomon made it really complicated. It was all marketing hype to make Solomon look better than the other binding companies. And I didn't do that. I actually went in and I trained them and I made my own visuals. And so from that, Solomon said, you have to go to Japan, you have to go to Australia, you have to go to France, Germany, England. And I went all around the world several times teaching people how to teach the program.
Right.
And once you get the bite of travel in you, geez, I don't know how many million miles I got on this body, but I spent most of my life, traveling in an airport.
Sitting on airplanes. But
Which
then you left that industry.
I got a call from actually I was on an airplane going out to Vail to ski with some friends. And I'm sitting next to a guy who worked for Heidrick and Struggles, which is the premier recruiting agency in America. I always remember they did 360 of the Fortune 500 CEOs. So you're like, these are the guys.
Right.
And the guy's talking to me a little bit, and he said, "Well, maybe bump each other's ski." I said, "Great." So, and I was just about to introduce the yellow boot, which is a really famous ski boot. Um, so the next day, he sees the yellow boot. He comes up and says, "Pat," the guy's name was Dave Henderson. He's a friend of mine still, 30 years, 40 years later. And so we skied all day, and he said, "You really should, think about leaving the ski business." I said, "No, are you kidding?" It's romantic. You drink every night, you ski all day, you make good money, not great money, but what the hell is you like? I'm not a ski bum. I'm a successful skier,
Right.
and like, why would I want to take another job? So Heidrick was hired by EMI Capital Records in London to hire someone to revolutionize marketing, a little bit like we did with skiing, to change the way music is marketed in the United States. And so they had sent everybody from Kellogg and all the business schools, and they kept saying, and Capital kept saying, Charles Koppelman and Terry Santisi kept saying, it's not what we're looking for. We need somebody who can have his own idea. So after saying no 3 times, Dave called me up. Dave Henderson called me up. So would you do me a favor? Would you just go to the interview? You don't have to take the job. I just want to show them that Heidrich and Struggle knows you kind of guys, but you don't want that kind of job. I said, sure, I'll go. So I go in, it's going to be a 15-minute interview. I was there 3.5 hours. I talked to everyone around the world. They were getting Jim Fifield, the chairman in London, was on the phone. And so I'm driving home. I think in the ski business, you make, $100,000 or two, whatever it is, but $100,000, I'd say. I'm driving home, and the recruiter calls me up and says, how do you think you did? And I said, hey, listen, you told me to go there, be myself, show them that they, crazy guys like me. I think they had a good time, but I don't know what that means. He goes, they want to hire you. I said, I don't want to be in the music business. They're going to pay you 5 times what you're currently making. I said, I don't even need furniture. I can buy new clothing. I can start in 15 minutes. I can turn this car around. So the question was, for this much money, would you leave skiing and go in the music business?
Right.
And so I said yes. And I remember I had also done a couple of beer projects.
Right.
Your viewers may know St. Pauli Girl. We did that in 1980, and we took it from obscurity to 4.5 million cases in 1 year. That's huge. Then the group got together again, similar group under Rich Fogarty, one of my real mentors. In 1990, we did Rolling Rock beer. And if you think about Rolling Rock, was just an American version, long neck green bottle, same marketing. You're a yuppie, women think you're better looking with a long neck green bottle. And so I had that packaged goods in my experience also, and so that helped. So anyway, I ended up in the music business, doing all the major marketing releases for the world for EMI and Capitol, which would have been anybody from Garth Brooks to the Beatles.
You worked so long with Garth Brooks, and you did some remarkable things. Tell us about some of the things that you've done with Garth. I mean, you foreshadowed Garth because you mentioned him earlier about the Yogi Berra jersey. So I know people are waiting to hear about you and Garth. I mean, you did the Central Park event with Garth.
Well,
Saturday.
it really started not long after I was in the business. When you have a corner office on the 42nd floor of a New York City office building, you're living large. And I had a corner office. Phone rings, you push the button. This is Pat. Are you the marketing guy? Yeah, this is Garth Brooks. I said, I've heard of you. He laughs, I laugh. And it became a lifetime friendship. And he just basically said, can you take a look at my business and see, is it just all artists? Records go up and down. But I was doing really well, and now I'm doing whatever he was doing. Much more than anybody else, but not as much as he used to do. I said, sure, I'll look at it. And so I looked at it, and he called me up and said, can you meet me tomorrow in Nashville? I said, sure. So I went to see Charles Koppelman, who was the chairman and a real music guy, from Barbra Streisand, Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra duets was Charles Koppelman. So these people really knew the business. But the nice thing was they knew my side of the business, which was they wanted to make things that sold. They didn't want to just keep doing the same garbage.
Right.
And so I said, Charles, I'm going to go see Garth tomorrow. He goes, take my plane. And Gene Runze, one of the guys who ran all the sales, just laughed hysterically and said, you're the only person who ever got that airplane. So I flew down, I met Garth. And while I was there, I said, Garth, I do have an idea. I know you don't want to do a greatest hits album, but why don't we do an album called The Hits and only put it out for 6 months? He goes, what do you mean 6 months? How many can you sell in 6 months? I said, 10 million. And my last album sold 1.5 million. I said, 10 million. And he said, okay. He said, what do we do? I said, we call Charles up. So, and there were other elements. So we had Charles Koppelman, the US chairman, and Jim Fifield, the worldwide chairman, on the phone with Garth and I, talking on his cell phone. And I said, Charles, I'm sitting with Garth, and I told him the truth that I know he already said no to you, he said no to Jim. And I presented a plan to him, and he just wants to make sure we can do it. So he wanted to call and get your confirmation. He goes, okay, what do you got? I said, we guarantee him 7 million units. So for your audience, 7 million units means if we sell 100,000, I still have to pay him on 7 million. So we're talking a lot of money. And Charles said, hold on. So he gets Jim on the phone, and Jim laughs and goes, where do we recoup that? Is where do we break even? I said, 4.2 million. He said, let's take that bet. And he said, hey, before you go, guys, one other thing is, what's that? Charles is a great cigar smoker. What else you guys said? I said, we only sell it for 6 months a year. 6 months? Are you out of your mind? And we all laughed. And Jim was laughing more than anybody in Fifield. And Jim said, you have the numbers, Pat? And I said, yeah. He said, okay, do it. We sold 10 million in 6 months. I mean, that's a record. Like Adele's 21, I think, did 7 or 8 million in 6 months. So it was, the velocity for Garth was so huge, it was ridiculous. And that became kind of the new model for Garth. So I didn't want to live in Nashville. I didn't want to do his marketing, but I was available for him whenever he needed anything. So he did the next album, with the Nashville group, and it didn't work again. At least, to Garth's satisfaction. And so I'm not going to use any names, but he said, come on down and find out what happened. So I go down and I talking to the president of Capitol at the time, and I said, you seem to have cut your Garth marketing budget by 50%. What do you think was going to happen? Because I didn't cut the Garth marketing budget by 50%. He calls in the sales manager and he says, basically he said, this asshole from New York is saying I cut the Garth budget by 50%. The sales manager says, you told me to cut the budget by 50%. I didn't tell you, Garth. That's the only marketing budget we have. So the guy just did what he was told. And,
Right.
and so the guy running Capital Times said, Pat, I apologize. I guess I did do that. And he goes, and so I understand. So we kind of reversed that whole model. But Garth was, it's like if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Country music indexing, that is per capita, country music in New York is the worst indexing music of any genre in any city. So theoretically, we had no chance of winning in New York. So we hatched the idea of Central Park, and I remember Garth looked at me and said, "You're the boss. If you think we can do it, let's do it." And a 1,200,000 people showed up to see
Yeah.
Garth at Central Park, and it was rated at HBO's high rated. I don't know if it still is, but it was its highest rated show in New York City. It got a 50 share, which is Super Bowl.
Right.
And then Garth, it really marketing starts with a good product, and there's no better product ever.
Tell me,
conceived than Garth.
tell me that story about Garth standing on the balcony before he went down to play.
Well, I guess he was with his wife, Sandy, and she said, "I'm going to see if anybody here." And Garth said, "Don't, it's going to be embarrassing." Because remember, if you're a country boy from Oklahoma in New York City, it's hard to believe New York's going to show up. And his wife turned around, and she was just bawling her eyes out and goes, "There's nobody there." She goes, "They're in the streets." I mean, I don't even know the story, but they were over the walls of Central Park. The police had to shut off both Central Park West and Fifth Avenue. That is one huge swath of land. And we had huge Sony jumbotrons up there, and he knocked them dead. And I remember after the show, he and I had dinner. I said, "What do you think?" He goes, "I don't really remember anything." Pat, I looked out there. Can you imagine looking at 1,000,000 people? I looked at the man and said, "Let's do Friday night show."
Yeah.
And he was just, that might have been his greatest show. He was spectacular. To entertain that many people without batting an eye was spectacular.
Now, at this point, though, you did move to Nashville.
Yeah, we moved down to Nashville in '97 for the first time, and I was the GM, the general manager of the label, and I guess there's political problems at the label which I couldn't resolve. And so I got a call one day that says, "Congratulations, you're the new president of Capitol Records." And of course, I'm laughing, saying, "I'm not a record label president, guys." He says, Ken Berry, I remember, was the new chairman of the world. He replaced Jim Fifield. He said, "I trust you, Pat. I'll help you if you need me." And Ken was a wonderful manager. That is, I needed him 3 times. I called him 3 times. All 3 times, he took care of the problem that fast, and it all worked out. So when you have a good manager like Ken Berry was for me, it's amazing how much you can get done. So anyway, we took over Capitol, and we took Steve. Gar said, "Pat, you don't want to just do me." So I took Steve Warner, who was a great Capitol or a great Nashville artist. I don't remember what label he was on, and I signed him. And his first album had a song called "Holes in the Floor of Heaven," and it was his first platinum selling album, a million selling albums. and then his second album, I believe, on platinum also. So and then so I had a superstar in Garth and I had a mid-level act in Steve Wariner, and they also about you need to break a new artist too. So we had a guy a band called Four Wheel Drive, had Keith Urban in it. So I went to Keith and said, Keith, you got to leave the band. I don't care if they're your backup band, but you got the name of the act is Keith Urban. We signed Keith to his own contract and basically broke Keith Urban also. So in the history of the music, if it's all a superstar, mid-level act, and a breaking artist, you've experienced what music has to offer in marketing.
Right. Did you ever, was there ever a time, Pat, where you just kind of sat down and were thinking to yourself, my gosh, look at what I've done? Did you and Garth ever have a moment like that? Like maybe at Central Park where Garth, a kid from Oklahoma is going, look what's going on. I mean, did you ever have those kind
Scott, the truth, I make it a point. I have no pictures of my life. I have no souvenirs. I really don't ever stop to look back, or I think I'd get old. I mean, it's mechanical with me,
right,
but I think it's a good habit not to look backwards.
right. Okay. Well, we're going to look backwards one more time because you got to tell me the story about the magazine article on you in Nashville.
Well, it was actually the New York Times.
Okay.
And the name of the article was Urban Renewal Comes to Country Music. So you can imagine a New York City kid who's not a country music fan, because we didn't have country music where I was raised, and taking over a label from a good guy. Doesn't matter what his name was, and and I remember going to the first country music meeting and stuff, and realizing I don't belong with these people. So I told Bill Catino, who ran our radio group, you have to be the member of the Country Music Association. It's not for me. And so I wasn't really distant, but the local paper here, the Nashville Scene, had run an article on me, put me on the front cover, and it said, "Will this man be the death of country music?" Geez, guys, you're taking it a little seriously, and I'm laughing, and like that makes them even more angry. And so the New York Times came down and did, I think, not a hatchet job. The other one was just a hatchet job. Did a nice story that basically said I'm a marketing guy. So I remember I don't drink beer, so but I still could succeed with St. Pauli Girl and Rolling Rock. Um, and uh, and so I said, as long as you respect the consumer, that is the buyer of the beer and the music or the watch or the ski boot, you'll be okay. And so I really cared for country music. And I remember the Times asked me, well, what is it to you? I said, it's small town living, it's family values, and it's a blue collar work ethic. If you can capture those elements in your story, you'll be successful in country music.
Yeah.
And of course, Garth did that as well, or better than anyone. And
Now, one of your biggest headaches, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was a success, but tell me about you and Garth and Chris Gaines.
well, he had an idea for a soundtrack for a movie that wasn't made, and it was for Chris Gaines, and it was a kind of a rock guy, which Garth didn't want Garth Brooks to be singing rock music. He didn't want to take country music fans over to pop radio. So he would do it under another name, and they can know it's Garth, but he didn't want the persona of Garth Brooks to go to pop radio. And remember, these are the days of Shania Twain and a lot of crossover where country radio was going down and pop was going up because they were stealing our fans. So
Right.
Garth didn't want to participate in that. So he created the album Chris Gaines. And if you listen to the music, quite honestly, it's still relevant today. It's a wonderful album.
Right. Yeah.
And so I went to Rick Ludwin, who ran programming for NBC. I said, Rick, could you have Garth be the host and Chris Gaines be the musical guest of Saturday Night Live? And he goes, we've never done anything like that. What do you think? And Rick was a great, great partner for us. And so he agreed to it. And of course, the whole group at Saturday Night Live really loved working with Garth. He was very funny. And I remember Lauren telling me, you know what Garth does? He takes possession of the product. So you can watch Saturday Night Live, and sometimes the worst skits are the funniest because the people they don't laugh, they stay straight to it. Versus, I know this is really bad. Garth never let on how bad it was, and so all his skits were really successful. And so we put out Chris Gaines, and I think it was like the 10th or 12th biggest selling album of the year. But for us, I think we scanned over 2 million albums, which is, I mean, in today's world, you'd be number one for 2 years of 2 million albums.
Right.
Um, but it wasn't Garth numbers.
Right.
So we simply voluntarily pulled the record out of the marketplace. So it was very successful, financially successful, but if we weren't going to get 10 million out of it, we didn't want to leave it in the marketplace. So Chris Gaines goes away. I, for one, believe Chris Gaines has to make a comeback. The music is too good to just go away. So we'll maybe someday we'll find a way to resurrect Chris Gaines and do something fun with it.
Now, Keith Urban, when you suggested he leave his band or become the, Keith Urban and they could be part of his backup, did you know at that time that Keith could become a star?
I did. I had somebody say, Pat, I just don't hear it. And I said, you're not supposed to hear it. You're supposed to see it. So when we sat with Keith, I said, Keith, I want you to go right after the Dixie Chicks fans, not to take them away, but to have the same fans. They're modern, they're young, they're female. And so if you look at Keith Urban's first song, who sings backup? The Dixie Chicks, or backup singers on Keith's first album. So we had a real specific plan as to what to do with Keith. And I spent a lot of money on Keith TV, not the traditional way, on TV, radio, and but if you're watching this show, go to, I don't know if it's on YouTube, but "The Devil Went Down to Nashville" by Keith Urban.
Uh-huh.
The Devil Went Down to Georgia is a fiddle song.
Right.
Keith Urban can play that faster on the guitar than Charlie Daniels can play it on the fiddle. So when you see that, you say, Keith, you're a guitarist. And I remember saying to Keith, do you belong here, or would you rather be on Virgin Records out in LA? And he said to me, when you were young, did you like Glenn Campbell? I said, yeah. He goes, did you know this country? I said, no. He said, okay, they won't know I'm country either, but I'm country. So
Yeah.
Keith knew exactly who he was. And that's when you know you can bet on somebody, when they know who you are. And at the time, to be on Virgin Records was, Janet Jackson. It was cool, Roxette. There were a lot of fun bands on Virgin Records. But he knew he wanted to be true to country, and I think that product showed itself over time.
Now, you got married to Marcel. She had a child, and you had four together, twins, and then two other kids. So much of your career happened before your kids were born, even. As they got older and now, college age, do they understand the impact that you've had in the music industry and some of the stars that you helped create?
No. I hope I don't. Marcel's, probably tired of hearing it, because you have to talk to your wife, because you're thinking out loud is really what you're doing.
Right.
But for the kids, Harrison, a couple of months ago, I took him to see Garth for the first time ever. He's 23 years old. So I took them skiing to Vail. They didn't like it. And I'm like, I'm not going to force them to be skiers. I'm not going to force them to like certain music. And that's why my kids hate me. I don't really mean they hate me, but they're like, you didn't give us religion. You didn't give us politics. So you didn't tell us to be a liberal Democrat who believes in the Catholic Church. And I said, no, that's not what life is about. Now, remember, my kids are an experiment, so I feel bad. They have to find what truth is for themselves. I didn't ram it down their throat. And so I didn't. So they really, like I said, you look around here, you never know I was ever in the music business.
Yeah. What's happened to the music business?
Well, I think it started with MP3, which was, hey, here's the way you don't have to buy music anymore. And so that became the digital revolution. The music industry knew what could happen, but they took a risk because the CD was so profitable that, net, they still made more money than had they not come out with digital music. So when digital music came along and then streaming came along, the truth is, if you look at streaming for $9.99 a month, nobody pays $9.99. I don't mean nobody, but people have family plans and they get 3 months for free, or they listen for free on Spotify. So I think the average is like $4.83. If you can have all the music in the world for $4.83, I in the music business can't make the kind of profit I used to make. It's not enough money.
Yeah.
So the truth is, there was so much money in the stock of Spotify that everybody closed their eyes and let it go. And now, unless you have a hit as a songwriter, you're dead. There's no album cuts anymore because there are no albums anymore. And so I think streaming kind of interferes with the that special relationship between an artist and a fan, where the fan says, "I want to own a piece of the art," and so they buy the album and they
Right.
read the liner notes, and whether it's vinyl or CD or cassette tape, doesn't matter. They wear it out. And today, it's a jukebox on your computer or your phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the relationship, I think, is the celebrity is now your phone, your new phone, not your new artist.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting way of looking at it. What was the happiest time in your life?
I think when we first got married and first moved down here, I didn't get married till I was 45, and it was great. I mean, you can't be happier than having, Chloe's a great little kid, and I had these twins, and we're living in a house in Nashville, and and it was tough because I lost New York City. But if you're not going to be a bachelor anymore, you better get the hell out of New York City. You don't want to raise your kids there, and you don't
Yeah.
want to be there when you're married. So I think when I first came down here, and it was hard to be happier than in the ski business,
Yeah.
because the skiing was about blue skies and great friends. Remember, your competitors in skiing are your best friends.
Right.
So there was no fighting. So for work, my happiest time was running a company named Lang Ski Boot Company, and my private life, it was when the family came together in Nashville, um, just by ourselves.
Now, in your lifetime, was there an invention that came along that you went, how did I ever get along without that?
Well, today it's obviously the cell phone, because when was the last time you wore a watch?
Yeah.
When was the
Yeah.
last time you looked at a camera or a video camera or anything else? So um, I'd have to say that the phone actualized what the internet could be. So you want to say it's the internet, but really the phone made the internet, powered the internet. So for me, it's the smartphone.
Now, in your lifetime, you've lived through so many remarkable events on the national scale: Kennedy assassination, Vietnam War, the space shuttle tragedy, the moon landing, something good for the first time in 69, 9/11, this pandemic right now. What is it in your lifetime that you think affected you the most, where you remember exactly where you were the moment it happened?
I think it was Richard Nixon. I never registered to vote, and in 1974, I would have been 24 years old and well beyond the time to vote. And Nixon's kicked out. So I said, okay, the system works. I'm going to vote. So I went to the municipal building in Pompano Lakes, New Jersey, to register to vote. And Mike Corbett, an old time friend, walks in and says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm going to register to vote." And he goes, "Why?" I said, "They got Nixon. He's out. It shows the system can work. We can prevail." He said, "Do you know who's going to be president of the United States?" I said, "Gerald Ford." I said, "Never mind, Mike. You're right." I walked out and said, "The system doesn't work. I got to get out. Gerald Ford's going to be president." And that, so, but Nixon was evil incarnate to me, in that he lied about Vietnam. And everybody, even McNamara in these days, have all admitted, yeah, we knew, Johnson knew, everybody knew, and Nixon just lied to us. Nixon was the first one to realize, show you how stupid the American voter is, when he said, "I've got a 7-day plan if you elect me president of the United States to end this war." So hang in there. Could be several years later. Of course, it was 6 years later when they finally threw him out.
Yeah.
Um, so I think Nixon came at the right time to be evil with Vietnam, and that really powered it. And that's, remember, now you're looking, telling your father, who's the greatest generation, "Dad, the government's lying to you." I don't know if they're lying to you. I don't know if Roosevelt knew when they circled all the boats together in Pearl Harbor, the Japanese were coming. I don't know. There's a lot of talk that he did, because he needed to get out of Lend Lease, and he needed to find a way to get in the war. He didn't know it'd be that bad, obviously. And so you're at a point where you say, all of this isn't good for us to just follow blindly, whether it's follow your religion blindly, follow your parents blindly, follow your government blindly. And so a little bit, you become a nihilist, which is, do you believe in anything? Like my kids will say, my wife will say, "Do you believe in anything?" Like, not really. No, I'm not locked into anything. So if you have evidence of something different, I'll listen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this today, man.
My pleasure, Scott.
Thanks so much for watching. please make sure you like and subscribe right here to our YouTube channel. And if you enjoyed, please share with your friends. And if you want to see our collection of thousands of stories told by the people who live them, please head on over to gbctv.net. Thanks so much.